Good morning, everyone. It's glad to be back among you. This morning, we are very honored to have a well-renowned speaker with us. But in the setup of this, I want to give his executive assistant, Ashley, a lot of credit here. She brought in the thumb. There she is. She brought in the thumb drive. She set the computer up. She told Doug where to stand and told me where to stand.
She did.
And we followed her directions, and we got everything working well.
Yeah.
Ashley, if you don't know, is Jim and Sherry's daughter, and so Gibson. So they're back there all together and watching us. Thank you. Appreciate it, Ashley. We're pleased this morning to have the Reverend Dr. Doug Powe with us. For those of you who read the chat this last week, you know that he is president, as of January, was named president of the seminary here in town. His wife is an ordained Methodist pastor, and so that's where Doug and I have a little bit in common. I was raised Methodist, so we talk this foreign language. He talks it at home all the time, and I've remembered a few words. They do have a son, Rich, who is a student at OSU. No, it's Ohio State. So
National champions.
I got him.
You got him. National champions.
He said remind national champions.
National champions. Yeah. Just you got to always say that. National champions.
They also have a dog named Smokey, who arguably some think runs the house. So we had to get that in. Dr. Powe is a well-renowned scholar. Has written several books. Among those, The Adept Church, as well as Sustaining While Disrupting. He's a sought-after speaker on faith, leadership, and the future of the church. Let's welcome Dr. Powe.
Good morning, and it is wonderful to be with you all. And it is very true that Ashley actually does tell me what to do on a daily basis. That is true. Someone does need to. Yes. Let us go to the Lord in prayer. Gracious God, we're so thankful for this day. We're so thankful for this time and this group. The witness of Harvard Avenue Christian Church and what it means not only to this community, but for this denomination. We ask now that your spirit would dwell with us. We ask this in your son's name. Amen. Thank you, Hank, for the wonderful introduction. It is wonderful to be with you all. I have been here in Tulsa since January. Everyone always asks me how I like Tulsa. I like Tulsa. I said there is only right now one thing that has disturbed me about Tulsa is that when it rains, my car gets dirty. Ashley knows this. No, there's two things actually. When it rains, my car gets dirty, and you all have no clue how to remove snow. Yes, those are the two things that, beyond that, Tulsa is a perfect. Yes, Ashley knows that I want to help with snow removal because it was not good. Yes. But beyond that, I have. They asked me just to share a little bit about my journey. So I have been at all Methodist places. I'm an ordained Methodist elder. But I went to Ohio Wesleyan University, which is a small rural Methodist school in Ohio. I did my Master of Divinity at Candler School of Theology, which is at Emory University. My PhD is at Emory. And after that, I went to work at St. Paul School of Theology, which is in Missouri. Right now, actually, is located on Church of Resurrection campus. From there, I went to Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C. area, and then have been fortunate to come here and to lead Phillips Theological Seminary, so Disciple of Christ. So I appreciate being sort of drafted into the Disciple of Christ family. So that is just a little bit about me. And my focus today is going to be on sort of what's happening in the mainline denomination. Mainline denominations, as many of you know, are struggling. And I'm even going to drill down into sort of some disciple stats. It was sort of interesting when I was researching this. Some of you may know some of this, but some of it might actually be surprising to you. And then talk about a little bit what this means for the seminary and hopefully some possibilities for the future. So one of the interesting things about mainline denominations is that mainline denominations in this country, the United States, really started on what we call a volunteer association model. And by that, if you think of Rotary Club, Lions Club, all of those organizations, mainline denominations started off of that same sort of model of a volunteer association. And the goal for volunteer associations really was to better society. In some ways, most of our mainline denominations had the same goal. If you think about hospitals, schools, all these other organizations, mainline denominations are responsible for a lot of those things being in our society if you go to any community. So that there was a day and time when mainline denominations really dominated the landscape because they were the ones that were creating these organizations for the betterment of society. That was wonderful up until about the 1950s when we hit our peak for volunteer associations. And since the 1950s, there's been a decline in volunteer associations across the board. So if you look at Lions, Kiwanis, and those sort of organizations, they have all started declining. And the same is true for mainline denominations. There has been a decline in them. And of course, this model was intentional and very different from England, where, of course, we settlers came from, where the church belonged to the state. So in mainline denominations, you have to recruit members. And the recruiting of members allowed for a rapid expansion going towards the west. Like I said, the 50s and 60s were the heyday. And since that time, there's been sort of a slow decline, but beginning in the 2000 is when we saw the major decline, except for 2001. And why was there no decline in 2001? 9/11, that is right. Yes, 9/11. So in 9/11, there were actually a blip where church attendance went up that 1 year in 2001. But from that time, though, you've seen a steady decline in mainline denominations. We're going to talk a little bit about generational challenges and perception, and also sort of the mission of the church as we move forward. But before we do that, just some stats related first in general and then to disciples. So median worship has sort of declined by half from 2000 to 2020. So you're looking at about 130 average to about 65 in mainline denominations. And I should have said disciples is a part of mainline denominations. I did make that assumption. And the pace of decline is increasing. That's the part that is sort of scary. Less churches with over 100 attending. The exception of this decline are churches over 1,500 in worship attendance. So those churches aren't seeing that sharp of decline. And it's also true for Catholic congregations or parishes, to be technically correct, for the decline. This chart shows, and you'll see the highlighted area, where from 2000 to 2019, average worship, AWA, average worship attendance, where the change has taken place. So you have more congregations between 26 and 50 or 25 or fewer. So that's where the increase in congregations are. And that's because if you look at the categories above that, they all are decreasing, except for the very top, which is those over 1,000. So average worship attendance is going down for every other category except for the very small congregations. So let's talk about disciple congregations. So in 2018, there were, and these statistics come from your statistics people, 3,171 disciple churches. In 2024, there are 2,857 disciple churches. So you could see that there are less disciple churches today and probably will be less each year as we go along for the next few years. If we look at membership, in 2018, 382,000 members. Now you have, I'm going to round up because I'm going to be nice. There's 250,000 disciples right now. So that from 2018 to 2024, you've lost over 100,000 disciple members in that time period. So that's a pretty significant decrease at a 6-year period or time frame. Those who participate, this is I find this one interesting because I'd be curious of how they figure out participation. Does it mean you show up once, or what does it mean to be a participating disciple? You say, I love Jesus. I don't know what it means. Maybe someone here knows what it means to be a participating disciple. This was a new category for me. But 2018, there were 234,000 participating. Now there's 70,000 participating disciples at this point in time. So you can see the statistics there continuing to go down. Average worship attendance. In 2018, about 125,000. Average worship is 87,000 now for disciples across the United States. So if we talk about Oklahoma disciples, you had about 148 churches in 2018. Now you have about 120 churches. So the decline is still there, but not quite as bad as the national average. In terms of participants, did I skip one? No. In terms of participants, you had about 14,500 in 2018 and about 11,710 now. And your average worship attendance went from 7,396 to now about 5,500 for average worship attendance in Oklahoma for disciple congregations. So you can see the decline there. The good news, because you all are saying, what is the good news? The good news is Harvard Avenue has about 423 average worship attendance and is number 1 in Oklahoma in average worship attendance. About 1,186 for members, and 932 of you are participating, which I still don't know what that means. First Edmond, First Norman, Wildwood, Enid, and Midwest are then the other sort of top churches in Oklahoma. And you could see from Harvard, number 1, to Midwest, a pretty significant difference in the average worship attendance. All right, this is where you all get to participate for a few minutes in the conversation. My question to you is, what makes Harvard unique? So I'm going to give you a few minutes to talk about and tell me why Harvard is doing so well compared to everybody else in Oklahoma in terms of average worship attendance. What is your secret ingredient? So you get about 5 or 6 minutes.
Accepting.
All right.
We're incredibly accepting, including outreach accepting.
All right. Incredibly accepting. Uh-oh.
Much as anything, but I wonder if we just keep better records. Well,
that could be,
think about it a minute. I was going to ask you, do the attendance figures include those that watch from home?
I asked that question. They tell me yes. Now, again, I'm relying upon your statistics people, and they're relying upon, obviously, you all to report the statistics. So they say it does include those watching from home. Because I would have thought it would be higher for people watching virtually, probably, which would increase those numbers some. So I got to go by what they tell me.
Harvard Avenue has a very active youth program and a high emphasis on youth in the church.
Very welcome, sister.
So as a 40-year plus member, I would say the reason why we're so successful is because we have a great relationship with the mothership in Indianapolis, and we get the very best ministers in the country to come every time we have an opening. I think we're really growing because of our high quality ministerial staff.
There's another hand. Oh, one back here first.
Would you please clarify, what does participating mean?
I have asked that. I really would like to know myself. I don't know. I mean, it's a term that disciples use. Is there someone in here who can clarify participating? In this one, I can't help you.
Well, as a former pastor, when I was coming up
Yeah.
with the numbers to report,
Yeah.
Participating, if they were involved, like in Sunday school or some attendance, it's not just you show up once.
Okay.
And I was really big about removing inactive folk.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, so yeah, I mean, it does vary, but at least there has to be some, moderate participation.
Some
Yeah.
moderate participation.
Yeah.
So there has to, is it physical or does financial count? So if I am homebound, but I financially, okay. Disattendance, okay. Interesting.
Okay, we are relatively new, and our very first visit, we were just awestruck by David's preaching. He just held me captive. My mind did not wander one bit, and so I want to point that out. But then also, just the welcoming hospitality of the whole congregation. We felt so welcome, and so those are the two ingredients that I think were important for us.
Yeah.
Oh, they had donuts, he said.
And there's a hand up front this way.
I think we are a very generous church, and we have ability to be generous here. And I think that's a big element.
All right. Yeah.
I think we're one of the few, what you might call progressive churches in town. And most of the others are of the old fundamentalist, fire and brimstone. And by being one of the few, that's why we've attracted so many young people. And, that's where our core is.
Yeah.
I think the music program with our choir director and our pianist and their music is a huge contribution.
Music program. And
Doug-
I gotta lift up the handbell choir because I know someone who personally plays in the handbell choir. I don't want to mention any names like Ashley, but
Doug, if I could
Yeah.
give a point of comparison, approximately 15 to 16 years ago,
Yeah.
the average attendance of this church was less than 80.
Uh-huh.
So we've made some major, as Connie was saying, through the choice of correct ministers who have gotten the leadership input and that sort of thing, we've made some great strides.
Well, it has definitely shown, and I'll give you all a chance to come back in a little bit. It's definitely shown, and I'm going to talk about a couple of these things a little bit later, but let me highlight just a couple now. One is I think that leadership is key, and that's one of the key points I want to come back to. And that, of course, is where the seminary comes in. Our role is to help to create leaders who are going to be able to lead disciple congregations and to do it well. And I think we are doing that well at Phillips, but I also think that in today's world, there is more that is needed. We theologically educate students so that they can do what you traditionally think about in the work of ministry. But I also think what is needed today is what I would call entrepreneurial sort of leadership, that you have to have sort of that spirit of being able to see opportunities within a community and being able to help direct the congregation to really think about how do we best use our resources to sort of meet those opportunities in the community. So that entrepreneurial aspect, I think, is key. And to be honest, seminaries have not done well in that part. We've done well on the theological part, not as well on the entrepreneurial part, but I will come back to that in a little bit. The other that I think is key is welcoming. I think that I have been in many congregations, probably near 1,000 in my whole career. I have never gone to a church yet that has not said, we are the church you've ever seen. Every church tells you they're the friendliest church. I'm waiting one day for some church to say, you know, we just don't like people. Yeah, I'm waiting on that. It has never happened. But the reality is, most congregations really struggle with hospitality. They tend to be friendly to one another, but they really struggle to welcome other people in who are coming from the outside. So I think hospitality really is critical. So that being able to do that well is important. Let me keep going. Mission. I think one of the struggles today for mainline denominations is mission. And the question is, what is unique about sort of the mission of mainline denominations versus other nonprofits? And I'm going to skip down to the bottom for a second. I looked up the mission of the United Way of Tulsa, and it says to unite people and resources to improve lives and strengthen communities. Then I did the Disciple of Christ mission as a denomination, witness and service, striving to be a movement for wholeness in a fragmented world. Now, if I didn't know Disciples of Christ was a church, that mission could look very similar to the mission of the United Way of Tulsa. There's not a whole lot of difference between the two missions. So the question for me is, what makes your mission unique that people can get behind and say, this is a place where I can really see something different happening? Now, I actually think that you all have a unique mission that actually helps you. Now, this is a test for you. I'm going to see how many people here actually know your mission. I'm not going to pick on anybody. I'm going to see if a volunteer knows the mission. Oh, I have someone. What is the mission?
Like Jesus.
That is correct. That is right. So it's a very easy, straightforward mission, but I think one of the things that helps is that while your mission does not sort of, counter what the mission is of the denomination, it really tells people we are a church that is looking to love like Jesus and do something unique within the community. And I think that uniqueness of your mission is actually very helpful. That can be counterintuitive. I know a lot of people today think you should move away from sort of grounding yourself in Christian or Jesus identity, but I think people know you're a church, so own up to being what you are and have your mission actually reflect that, but then have the hospitality that you actually are welcoming to everybody who comes. So I think the mission is helpful and critical. The key is that people 55 and above typically buy into the mainline sort of way the mission reads, because we all have been brought up in the volunteer association model, so that sort of mission makes sense to us. For those who are younger, they can't often distinguish between why should I go to a church versus another nonprofit organization, because really it's the same thing in their mind in terms of what the mission statement says. Excuse me. And I'll pick up on that a little bit, because next are generations. But before talking about the mission, the big challenge with generations is that all mainline denominations are maturing. 55% of the members are over age 50 in almost every mainline denomination, and only 16% are between 18 and 29. So if we think about disciples, that means about half, or 137,500 of disciples are over the age of 50. That's good in some ways, but also challenging in other ways, that 50% of the people are over the age of 50. What has changed, and this gets to the mission, what has changed in schools is that schools at one point started this thing called community engagement hours, right? So students were required to do community engagement to graduate. So embedded in what students do is helping out in the community so that they can receive these community engagement hours. So from a student's perspective, they are sort of taught from the time they're in school to volunteer in the community, in organizations. And in most cases, those organizations are not the church. So when they think of volunteer associations, they're thinking about what I learned in school. And that's the places where I'm going to live out this sort of volunteer life, where for most of us, we learn that volunteer life in the church itself. So part of the challenge we face in connecting with generations is the new generation is living out its volunteer life in other organizations, but they're not living it out in the church. The other challenge is most students learn differently today. The best example I can give, just to remind you all of my son who's at the Ohio State University National Football Champions. Just want to remind you of that. But you should be happy. We did beat Texas the first game. That, yes. I remember going, and I'm not sure why I had to do this, but I had to volunteer. You know how you have to volunteer? And it was chaos to me, even though I taught, because when I went to school, you sat in a straight row, faced the chalkboard, and the teacher was up front, and you had nice order and lectured to you. Here, they sat in these little communities of pods, and they were all talking, and the teacher's talking, and I'm trying to figure out how they're listening to the teacher, if they're all talking at the same time, and then they're doing stuff on their phone. I'm thinking, how the heck are they learning anything? This is the most chaotic thing I've experienced in my life. But it's the new style of education. They don't sit typically in straight rows anymore. They learn in these different communities. And this is the style they learn from a young age moving forward. If you think about that, when you go to church, what do? You sit facing forward, a preacher up front who's preaching to you, which is not the way students have learned to take in information. So again, it's opposite for how they have been educated to take in information. So our model for church, again, counters what they have grown up with most of their life at this point in time. So it's hard for us to connect with them in the way that we do worship. The third one is this idea of connected versus membership. For younger people, they don't actually see the advantage of membership. We in the church always talk about membership. They talk about connection. And for them, they may come one Sunday a month, but call that their church home because they feel connected to Harvard Avenue Christian Church. Whereas for most of us, membership has real meaning and is important. And there's a commitment to being a member of the congregation. I could go on for those things, but I think those are sort of three factors that have made a huge difference for generations. I am doing well on time, so I'll pause here for questions over anything so far. I have one. Well, that's a tough question. I think that some will say that it has helped students sort of be more engaged in community and learning together. And then others will say that it has hurt them in terms of focus and being able to sort of pay attention, particularly if you think about many students to sit through a 30-minute lecture, 45-minute lecture is not easy for them to do because they've never had to do it. Where for many of us, going to hear someone speak for that period of time would not be strange. So I think, it depends on, just in terms of pure information, I think you would hear educators say, sure, it's worked well. But in terms of, of other things, I'm not, I think it would depend on what you want. I have one here, then we'll come up here.
I'd like to suggest that one thing about Harvard Avenue that is unique, as far as I know, is that we use our building 7 days a week. And you are not pressured to join the church in order to enjoy yoga or mahjong or pickleball or many other activities.
Yeah.
And yet you are included.
A question would be, have we ever experimented with using both approaches? Sit front, listen to the lecture, a mini lecture, shorter lecture, and then break into groups.
Yeah.
Personally, I found that very, very effective way to learn.
There have been churches that have played around with that and that have done it well. And I think this gets back to the leadership aspect. I think if you have the right leader that can pull that off, that it can work, because, you know, the balancing act is in congregations, just to be frank and honest, is in this group right here, if I dramatically change the way we worship, I'm going to lose all my financial support, right? Because this group is used to worshiping in a particular way, and it's important that we don't give that up. So the question is, how do I sustain what those who've grown up in the church are doing while thinking about another group that may connect differently, going to what you said? So it's having a leader that can find that balancing act that is key. Yeah. Yeah. I got a few. 1, 2, and 3. Yeah.
Has there been an equivalent decline in theological school applicants?
Yes, there has. That you saw applications going down. The past couple years, there has been an increase at the NUC. This past fall, we actually at Phillips had one of our larger incoming classes for a while for new students coming in. The challenge is those are, I think, blips, and we have to be careful not to get too excited about those and make sure we're paying attention to the statistics. As a disciple seminary, if there are 250,000 disciples throughout the country, half of them are over 50. That means our pool, let's just say, is 137,000 people. So, I mean, we have a shrinking pool of disciple students that are going to be available for education in the future. So we need to make sure we're paying attention to it.
I want to point out that when I come to church, I do want to be educated, but mainly I come to worship. And worship would not happen for me if I was in a pod of students conversing and on their phone. That would not be worship for me. I think there needs to be a balance, I guess, a balance between, because I feel educated when I leave by David's sermons and well-informed, thought-provoking, but at the same time, I've had a worshipful experience.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. The challenge I'm pointing out is because we were brought up in an atmosphere where we naturally took information in that way, it's easy for us to do that. But for those who never have taken information in sort of in that style, even for worship, it doesn't make as much sense to them. So that's the disconnect often with some of the younger generations. I saw another hand back. It's right behind you.
Well, I'm kind of confused. I'm left-handed, so when I got to seminary and there were the desks, I was delighted because I could always pull one next to me and I'd have my. Do your classes do pods? And you're not saying to worship with these pods.
No, I'm not
I didn't
suggesting
think
that at all.
so.
No. I'm sharing why mainline churches have struggled to reach younger generations, or one of the reasons they struggle. So I'm not saying that everybody should stop doing what they're doing to do this. Yeah. But I'm just pointing out these are some of the factors of what's different today?
Hello. I am part of the younger generation. And what I can tell you is I have a very hard time focusing if I'm not doing 2 or 3 things at one time. And I didn't used to be that way. I used to be able to come to church and for 45 minutes I could sit and I could listen and have no problem whatsoever. Now my brain races all the time. And so you'll see me, I have my phone out. I am listening, I promise. This is my boss. I trust me, I'm listening. But I also have a couple of other things going on that are really significant right now. And if I don't pay attention to those, there is no way I can focus here. And so I think that is where there's a lot of us in this generation who have grown up with our phones attached to us. I don't love it. I'm not saying that I love it. I'm saying that's the reality of it. And so I'm not trying to take away from your worshipful experience, but in order for me to pay attention, I have to have that with me. I don't love it, but it's the reality.
All right, man. I have a lot of hands. What time do we end? 10:45. Okay, we're good. All right, we're good.
My question would be: you indicated that churches that have membership of 1,500 people or greater are not experiencing a decline. Why do you think that is?
Couple of reasons. One is they're able to do multiple things, right? In many cases, so they can craft a worship experience just for younger generations in many cases, where smaller churches aren't able to do that as well. So they can sort of build these building blocks for people to worship in different styles as they mature into faith in ways that others cannot. And they're able to offer significant programming for younger people that, again, smaller congregations cannot. So in many cases, that is the advantage they have. The disadvantage in many cases, as you know, and hopefully we'll talk about in a second, is that sometimes those churches struggle because they're splits, right? So you get these issues where they split, and that's where they start disintegrating. But the resources were the key.
I think a lot of the decline of the younger generation is really at the fault of sports. And I know all of you guys have grandkids. And football, soccer, baseball, whatever, they've got practices on Sunday. And, Sunday is not a day of worship anymore. They've just got all this stuff. So they're like, oh, we got to take them to baseball. We got to take the other kid to football. Oh, Oh, we can't go to church. We don't have time. And I think when you pass the sports fields and you see all the kids and the families there, they're not going to church.
Yes, it's funny that you mentioned that. When I was at Wesley, I ran what was called the Lewis Center for Church Leadership. Our most popular article, or one of our most popular, was an article on Sunday sports. But at the end of the article, what the person who wrote it points out is, even if we don't like it, it's here to stay, right? I mean, it's not going anywhere. So the question is, how are we going to adapt then to connect with those individuals in a different way? Because simply saying this is causing an issue, yes, but now what are we going to do about that? What is the opportunity from that we have now to connect with those families? Because, we all believe that our children or grandchildren are going to be the next superstar. So that's why we put them in sports, right? And that is going to take precedent in most cases over someone going to church. But that doesn't mean there aren't other ways to connect with them or find ways to connect with those individuals.
So our church has followed the way of many of the more non-denominationals to have life groups, which is 100% small groups of people getting together to worship and to study. And I think that's the 50% that don't like to sit in auditorium style seating and get fed in that way. So I know Whitney's been carrying the banner. We have a large number of life groups. There's more coming. Many in this group are doing both. So that kind of gets to the idea of doing them both. But I think that's a workaround to keep people that have different ways of learning and worshiping involved in the life of the church. And everything doesn't have to happen on Sunday for you to be an active church member.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, there were a couple more up this way, and then I'll press forward a little bit longer.
So, Doug,
Uh-huh.
let's talk about technology.
Yeah.
Seminary students with the access to their computers, and my question is ChatGPT,
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah.
How is that factored into your, I guess, curriculum?
Yeah.
And such, because it's there.
Oh, absolutely.
And I know it has to be addressed, and I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Well, let me first say that professors hate it, because it makes life more challenging. And we are trying to find ways, of course, to make sure people are authentically doing their work. The real challenge, though, learning from, my son and his friends at a certain point, it's going to be really hard to really catch those individuals who use that sort of AI, because if you use that AI right from the beginning, the professor actually doesn't know what your writing style is, right? The people we catch are those that we could tell, you wrote this way, but now all of a sudden, you have an A paper, something's off here. But if I don't know what your writing style is, then it becomes much harder. So I think what it's going to mean is that we're going to have to become more creative in the way that we have people do work and do more specific questions, oral exams. One that Ashley would love for me is go back to the old blue book where you have to write, because she's seen my handwriting and she loves it dearly. But I think it's going to take a lot of those different things, because, the AI is just going to continue to get better. Yeah. All right, let me continue on, because I know that worship. The other is perception. And religious institutions are no different than others. And in some ways, unfortunately, it causes more of an issue, because when it's a religious institution, we're held to a higher standard. So scandals then just give this perception that, well, they're no better than anybody else, so why should I even bother with the church? The other thing that's happened recently is, we have been perceived as very rigid. So people then started claiming no faith, or they called them the nuns, no religious affiliation. So for up until the last about 2 years, the fastest growing segment in America were that group called the nuns, no religious affiliation at all. The interesting thing now is that actually is slowing down a little bit, and it's because of white males. Surprisingly, white males now are the group that are sort of coming back to church, but most of them are going to evangelical. Yeah, he knew the answer to this. Most of them are going to evangelical churches, and people are trying to figure out if it has to do with the political situation of the country, or what is the reason that sort of shift has taken place. The other is mainline denominations have suffered because people are more congregationally focused and are not as denominationally focused. So people connect to a congregation. They don't necessarily connect to a denomination. And I think Harvard probably has the best of both worlds, where you're a part of a denomination, but your congregation is well known. People are probably connect to Harvard. They may not even initially know your disciples unless they're from that tradition. And some who connect may never become really interested in the higher echelons of the denomination. Their interests will stick with Harvard Avenue. For me, focusing on vitality is key, and that's one of the things that is key here, and the entrepreneurial leadership. And for entrepreneurial leadership, one of the things that I think is going to be important for the seminary, and I think for the disciples of the denomination, is what are the partnerships that we can form to train the next season of leaders like you all have received here, so that it's not just about the theological education, but how do we create some sort of program where those individuals learn that entrepreneurial spirit to be able to lead congregations in a way that is going to be effective, so that we can create more of those type of leaders for the future of the denomination as a whole. To me, that is going to be what is the next important step, because it is clear that keep doing what we're doing is not enough. So what we have to do is try to think outside of the box and do something that's going to have an impact on the denomination as a whole. And I think the entrepreneurial leadership is the place where we can have the impact. I'm grateful for many in this class have partnered with Phillips, and we would not be able to do what we were doing without those partnerships. But also look to the future where if people are interested in this idea of entrepreneurial leadership, that's a place where we could partner in the future, because I think Harvard Avenue is in a place where it could help the denomination to really develop sort of strong leaders that can do sort of both this sound theological work, but also the spirit of being able to do something fantastic and creative at different congregations. This becomes particularly challenging, I think, for seminary students. When you graduate, you're not going to go to Harvard Avenue Christian Church, right? I mean, that's not going to be your first appointment. Many students are going to start at a smaller or a rural church. And the key is, how do we help them to sustain in ministry during that time and to be able to do good work as they sort of learn and do their work, that one day they're going to move towards something different. I think that is a part of the key, because it can become challenging when you're really excited and on fire and you go someplace that has 7 people, and those 7 people are like, we just want you to show up, preach, and bury us when, it's time, right? I mean, and you're really wanting to do some other stuff. So it's helping to sustain individuals so that they don't become frustrated with, that you're not going to start here, you're going to start here, but don't get frustrated that there's still work that you can do that is critically important. The other thing that I will say, and here Phillips, I think, has a huge advantage, is we have what is called the Center for Ministry and Lay Training. And these individuals take sort of courses where they don't go through traditional seminary, but are getting trained so they can become commissioned and pastor typically smaller or rural congregations. And many of these individuals may be bivocational, but the key is we're going to need more really strong bivocational pastors, particularly for the rural and smaller congregations. So the work we do at that center, I think, is essential, and it's something that separates Phillips from the other seminaries, because we already have a program in place that is able to do that work. Just a few stats on Phillips, and after that I'll take questions for the last few minutes. Of course, we're a disciple seminary. We admitted 67 students this fall, which was one of our largest fall classes. Our admissions team and the whole seminary did a fantastic job. We're very excited about the number of students that came in. 50% of our students admitted are disciple affiliated. That's exciting because we're a disciple seminary. It's also scary because I just gave you the numbers, for the future. So there's a balancing act there for us that we have to pay attention to, of making sure that we look at that balancing act. And again, we're grateful for the support from Harvard Avenue Christian Church and the challengers. Many of the people in this group have supported us tremendously, and we're grateful for that support. Let me stop there and take questions. I appreciate your time, and I hope this has been interesting, at least a little bit of digging into sort of the future of the seminary, but also thinking of disciples in relation to that. Yeah. Yeah. It's a little bit more of a mixture. We started this past year, and Ashley may have to help me on this, what is called the Seminary Scholars Program, which was intentionally recruiting some students under the age of 35, although I think a couple of them are really close. But I would say that our average age probably now is probably in the 40s, that is averaged out because of some of that. So it's probably not quite as high as it was at one point in time. So from that perspective, it's good news.
What proportion are females?
I would say, and I'm trying to remember, if 65% of our students are female. Yeah, 100% of the seminary scholars are female, yes. The seminary scholars, you have to have a 3.5 GPA. What we have found is that we need more smart men, obviously. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure what happened, but yes, obviously the women, all the women are smart, but we need more smart men. Yeah, I get on here to the end of it. I'm not sure I don't know what happened. Yes. Yeah. Phillips has done really well in terms of attrition. We have a really high success rate, over 90%. Our students are really well taken care of, and we're very intentional about trying to make sure that we walk with them to help them succeed. One of the advantages for Phillips is I think that we're trying to grow at the right pace. Some seminaries are sort of student dependent, so they got to, let in a ton of students. For Phillips, most of our students are supported either by 100% or 80% scholarship. So for us, the students aren't really bringing income to us. So what we're trying to do is really support them and make sure that they can graduate. Sure. Yeah. The Center for Ministry and Lay Training used to be the old Missouri, help me Ashley, Missouri Lay Commissioner School. I may be getting that a little bit wrong, but Phillips then took over that school, and we named it the Center for Ministry and Lay Training. This happened before I got there. But what this school did is there are individuals who may have a calling to ministry, but I can't quit my job and go to seminary and go the traditional route. So this allows me to continue working, even as a plumber, and to take theological classes. So they're still taking theological classes. So it follows the same sort of roadmap, but it's not as intensive as if I were going to seminary regular. So they wouldn't get sort of the same sort of training you would at a seminary, but it does provide training for someone to be able to go into a smaller congregation and to lead effectively in that congregation. The other exciting thing about the center is it's going to start offering sort of what I would call courses that may be of interest to individuals like yourself, that would be stewardship, or courses that you might find if you want something just beyond your typical Bible study. So we're going to start having those offerings also through the center that lay would be interested in. The focus has been more on the ministry, so we're going to fill out sort of the lay part of it also. 3 minutes? All right.
The weekend with my granddaughter this past weekend. My granddaughter, who's 18 years old and starting college for the first time. And we were having some heavy duty discussions, and one of those dealt on my question, are you going to get a tattoo? To which she said, I don't know, maybe. And I said, Hannah, you don't want to do that. That's just terrible. She said, Grandpa, you're from another era. And you know, she's right. When I look at all that you're saying, I'm from another era. Unfortunately, I may not have time to learn about her era, but I'm trying. And I think we all are probably.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I mean, and I think the challenge, and I'm learning this more as I mature, is that we all sort of get used to the way we did things, and it makes sense to us, right? And you see something different, you're thinking, that just doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't mean that it's wrong, it's just different. And it's getting used to those things that are different that could be a real challenge. I mean, I still shake my head with my son because it's just, you're just like, this doesn't make any sense, but you sort of, as you say, you got to get used to it. And I believe all of us are never too old to learn some different things. Doesn't mean that we may completely agree with them, but we can still learn some new things. All right. Do I have time for one more, or am I out of time? All right, time for one more. Is there one last question? All right, if not, thank you all. I really appreciate it.